All right, everybody, it's the 9th of November, 2017. What I want to talk about this morning is it's about this dream I had where, it was about the time I started talking about how all of these biblical signs really tied in with these alien close encounters, and how I was making a message to them at the tail end of all these close encounters where they've shown me lights in the sky. And then I brought it up to my friends that night. I haven't mentioned this. I brought it up to my friends that night. And then they showed me this light show where this guy was looking into the sky asking, "What is it?" And what they showed me was actually, it's crazy. Hold on 1 second. So anyways, it would start off at eye level, right outside the front doors of these houses. As if this guy, it's so crazy, as if it was depicting a person to walk outside their house and look into the sky and say, "What was that?" or "Who is that?" And so it was just incredible. The visuals, the way it was depicted, I could only see it. Nobody else could see it. It was there, but it was just. And so the technology to create that, you can say the government has created some of this stuff, but the stuff I've seen, the government, there's no technology on this earth that could have done it. And so, and like I said, right after I said this to the people I was with in the car, and so it just got awkward, and they didn't really say anything, because I'm like, I saw a light coming out. It's got the same orangish yellow light that a lot of people see. And so I said, so basically that happened, and then where was I going with this? So basically it was just really an intense, there was emotions that I felt while it was going on that were just really intensely euphoric, like nothing I've ever felt before. And then also immediately, as soon as it got really crazy, so as soon as it started getting real crazy, actually, I started getting all like this feeling like, man, I started getting this nervous feeling like if I start getting nervous, I'm going to start acting weird. And if I start acting weird, it's going to stop. And I just didn't want it to stop. And I got really weird at that point. And so they were going to introduce me to this girl, and anyways, it probably wouldn't have worked out between us, but they basically said, he just started acting really weird. We don't know what's going on. And so anyways, we left, and anyways, that was the end of that story. But so all these events just occurring over a period of years. I've gone through the other events. I've had 3 more events. One where I was basically talking to them, trying to get them to understand. I was all super high. We were smoking a whole blunt of weed, and I was like, man, if they just understood that we can help them. And they showed me some shit the next night. It was like this aircraft that fucking exploded about 50 feet over the highway with a big white explosion light, and flew off into the distance with a green light, with a green flame coming out of it, some kind of combustion. I know, because there was actually smoke coming out of it, and it was just going so fast. There's nothing on this earth that could go. There was no there's no man-made aircraft that can go that fast. I firmly believe that. And so, building up to this, basically, they kept me from falling asleep on the highway, and almost actually fell asleep on the highway. And they lit up a cloud over me with a green flame. It was basically, they just used the cloud to kind of, because that's where my eyes, I guess, were at that moment. And so they kind of used the cloud as like to refract the light, or just amplify the light. So it was probably the same craft. Hold on. It was probably the same craft with, not a huge green flame, and didn't want to light the highway back up again to save me, or do something too crazy, or at least cause too much of an alarm about what it's really up to. That's kind of what I'm getting at anyways. Goddamn. And so later on, I I had the experience where, like I said, that was pretty much the extent of it. And then I posted that video to YouTube. It was like you couldn't really tell what I was doing. I was just kind of going through a weird phase where I was posting all this random shit online, and people ended up making a like they ended up predicting the future out of it, because they basically assumed that I was going through some kind of a like a psychic vision or something, which I didn't really feel like that. I was just doing, so maybe it was just their intuition kind of guiding them to that conclusion and forming their own intuitive thing. So that's kind of a weird story too, but either way, what ended up happening is it was really about them. And I think, well, see, that's what I'm saying. They know everything. They read your mind. They know what's going on inside your head. They can see through your eyes. I mean, they said before that they've gotten one of these things and that it can escape through the walls. So that's just something that's being said, but I'm just, as far as what I've seen myself personally. And so there was this thing that came over me, and it was this feeling where I started pacing back and forth, and it was literally something, it was just an advanced mechanism to get inside of my mind and inside of my body and cause me to see things, and just amazing things. Not like just some little hallucination, but we're talking incredibly vivid spectacles like you would see on acid. And they were just incredibly euphoric, and they were just, oh my God, I can't hardly explain it. And so it was telling me, there was these voices, and they were going, Tanner, can you hear us? And I think it was people in the NSA, because they already let me know that they were hacking my phone and stuff. And I think that it was just a thing where I was coming into this empowerment thing, and I was able to actually hear their voices and stuff. So it was just a display of power really for everybody, which you could call that a weapon or not, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. But at this point, it just was mysterious. And so I sat there and I stood there, I was standing, and I said, and there was this little ball that floated into this painting of this waterfall, and it opened up into this paradise. Like it exploded outwards like a water drop falls into water, but as it went out, it opened up into a new, almost like a 3D image where I could see into it, and it was just beautiful. It's just crazy. And so, anyway, so I said, what do you want? And it said, read the Bible, Tanner, and think about it. And then not long after that, I had that vision of vapor of smoke. This is before I even really started to get into the Bible. Because eventually, yeah, you get curious. You're starting to wonder, what is this thing trying to teach me? And is it God? You know, your natural conclusion is it's God. But then so I ended up realizing all this shit about the Bible and all this hypocrisy shit and all of it going back to the drug war, and ended up making all these videos and having all these revelations. And then there was all this spin, and then they tried to make me commit suicide, and it was in the music about how, trying to really play up the whole problem of it, which the revelations were so strong, it was almost like something wanted me to experience these revelations to be killed. And then there's all this stuff, and I'm going to get into the weird stuff, because there's all this stuff in the Bible about a prophet is never welcome in his own country. There's all this stuff in the Bible about accepting things with simplicity and stuff like that. And so, it's just, I've come to understand that this is a weapon system. Because here's the thing, the very first thing I said to them was something to aliens. So then they come back with all this stuff about the Bible. To me, it sounds like, almost like with the acacia strain, it's almost like an instinct of a predator or a creep or an evil, a source of an evil mission or something, that it always kind of wants to roll out and tell you what it's about to do to you, but not in a very, thorough way, like almost like when you're hunting a serial killer and he just keeps leaving clues on purpose. And it's just something weird about him where they've got to let you know somehow. So, but with the acacia strain in that song Impaler where they say we're wolves in sheep's clothing, but you don't realize it for years and shit. So the thing about it is that I started to realize all this shit and started to put it all together. And what ended up happening was I had this dream. And this is why I'm making this video, so I can fill y'all in on this. I had sleep paralysis. And I was waking up from a state of sleep paralysis, or from a sleep, and I was paralyzed because sometimes I wake up and my mind is awake but my body isn't. But I've never had any kind of visuals or hallucinations during this before. So I've never had visuals with sleep paralysis before, but anyways, what I ended up seeing was there was this alien-like being. It almost looked like something out of the movie Star Wars. I can't remember. It looked like one of these emperor-like beings that I can't remember which one it was, but it just kind of had a flat face and it had two big eyes and no mouth, or a mouth but no nose, or something like that, and some kind of thing on its head, as I recall. And it was standing over me, and it was about 2 or 3 of them, and they were standing over me, and there was a fire in front of them, and they were warming their hands on the fire. And as they were warming their hands on the fire, they were relaying a message to me telepathically, mentally, whatever. And the message was, this is for us a fear-based thing where we don't have a choice. You know what I mean? But it was a little bit more creepy. Like when it looked at me like, you're fucking dead. It looked at me like, God damn, I can't explain it, man. It just looked at me like the whole thing was just a message in and of itself. Just, I'm paralyzed, I can't move, you're standing over me with creepy face and creepy eyes, relaying creepy messages to me, and I can't move, and it doesn't feel good at all, And at one point, I became angry, and I basically just said something to it like, yes, it's fear. You're gonna live by fear, because that's who you are, something like that. But I don't think it was said in a way that was like totally aggressive. I think it was more out of just the anxiety of it all, because it was just a really weird scenario. And I've seen YouTube videos recently where they talk about sleep paralysis and how sometimes there's evil visions and how this gets entwined in with alien speculation and stuff like this. This is definitely speculation, but it's very interesting to say the least, because of all the other stuff that's definitely is going on. And again, I just want to go back into the aliens and stuff real quick and say, they showed me the vapor of smoke, and the way they showed it to me was I was sitting there and I said, well, I'm going to do an experiment where I do a meditation on power. And as I'm doing the experiment, and as I'm sitting there doing this experiment where I'm thinking about it, then all of a sudden this ball of smoke comes up in front of me. It's vapor of smoke, and it bends all the walls outward to the point where the walls are bending, popping, and cracking. Now, I know there was people there hacking my phone. I didn't even have VPN at the time, so I know for sure somebody witnessed that. And so when I say that, I had an experience where they then just told me I was straight up Jesus Christ after I didn't get killed, after following some assassination attempts on my life. So, and in those, and when that music had been released, they were talking about how I've realized something. Well, what they were in the production stages of was music where I believe at that time had already begun producing music about how I'm some kind of prophet. Well, as I've said before, it's got to be a targeting mechanism, because if I'm first a prophet and then they tell me I'm Jesus, and I'm not trying to get too weird with y'all, and yes, I've gone to a fucking nut house over shit that I see is going on YouTube, and I believe it's part of their warfare mechanism, because they say you haven't accepted things with the simplicity of a child, and that you've claimed to be Jesus Christ, and see, I've made this all so complex. It's just part of their system that you aren't supposed to do that, because for obvious reasons. The same reason the government censors things. They want you simple. They want you to accept things as they tell you things. They don't want you to think about things. And so it's just, as I see it, the last stages of it for me is basically, if I'm not killed for being the prophet of smoke, which, as they've said, a prophet's never welcome in his own country. It's all just allowable within the context of their religion. And what I'm getting at is a religion they designed for it to be allowable, and of course it's desirable for them, because, like I've said, it's a targeting mechanism. You become the prophet, you have the target, you reveal the information, which then people have to sit there and realize that this is an alien that is, once you have said that it's a weapon, then it becomes an even greater weapon, because it's an alien, So what it's initially supposed to achieve is for you to believe that the vapor of smoke, see, because it says in the Bible that there will be many men who see this. So if I'm one of the people and I'm announced, as a good person, obviously I'm portrayed as a good person because I'm attacked openly by people who claim to be wolves in sheep's clothing. So my words are considered righteous and good and from an honest place, So that's why they want me alive. That's why it's important to keep me alive, in my opinion. So the first thing is that, if the people who relay the message of the vapor of smoke are to be believed, then it's a message of assurance. A message of assurance that really people don't need and has already proven to be damaging. A lot of people really do believe that the end of the world is just simply something that's coming in the Bible, and that Jesus is coming back, the aliens are going to, basically take everybody into the spaceship and basically neuter everybody, where there's not going to be any more husbands and wives, like it says. And then probably bring some people back from the dead with some advanced technology that I've already seen should make that possible. They could probably just find the atoms and just reassemble them. I mean, if they can create all the shit that I've seen. So, like I said, as far as everything is concerned, and that's whenever I say that the government has gotten into my head over all this. Yeah, they did that thing, the last thing that I told you about, where they gave me another really strange vision in my house, and I was in the garage, where they said, "You're Jesus Christ," and it got really weird, a weird feeling. And they said, "Did you see me coming in the clouds?" And I was like, or "Did you see me coming down there?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "The love in your heart that grows with each passing moment," which to me just sounds like a going for broke statement for somebody who can't explain himself anymore, because he's already said so many conflicting statements, and hopes to still appear believable and a good, as a benevolent entity and not a malevolent entity. And so the thing about it is that once that happened, I was in the garage area, as I said. It was a pretty good sized house, and I made my way. There were some barriers in between me and the Xbox, and I made my way over to the Xbox. My ears started ringing, and I could feel something going through my head. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just there's some stuff in that Xbox, in the technology today, that you just don't even want to know. And I could just feel my head being rifled through like a file cabinet, because it was almost like I was being brought right back through the whole experience in first person. And as I've said before, I believe that they just send a message to your subconscious mind, and your subconscious just responds back with actual words. And that I think I've actually caught myself doing this before, where I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I think this way, and I'm like, what's this conversation going on underneath the surface, and it's like something subconscious going into me, peering in, and almost can, in a state of total meditation, where you lower your brainwaves down to the absolute lowest they can possibly go. You can almost hear them tapping into your subconscious mind, and hear them going in and saying stuff like asking certain type of questions, and then you're responding back. And so I think it works something like that. But anyways, my ears started ringing, and I just said, "What are you doing?" In this voice, it was a fuzzy transmission that sounded like a radio transmission. Came into my head, and this dude with an Italian type voice said, "Tanner, he said, Tanner, we know everything. It's embarrassing." I mean, there was no shame in his voice at all. I can't explain it. It was just like throwing it in my face, like big time. And so, anyways, that happened. And if you ask me, it has to do with all this alien stuff, and the government just really almost feels like they need to know, so they're just doing weird shit. But I think you ought to know about it. And I can't say if it's right or wrong anymore. I don't even care. But what I can say is this, that the whole thing's is a diabolical situation that goes beyond anything. You can't explain it. I'm sure as soon as they heard that experience and heard me talk about it, and they heard all the walls popping and bending, they probably just built something into the very next Xbox to try to go inside somebody's head and figure out what the hell's going on with me. So that whenever it happens, then they can get a fresh reading, going into my head and figuring out exactly what happened as it's happening, when it happens. Something a little easier to verify than going in my head and figuring out what happened a year or two ago. They feel like they need the information, and so I'm just saying, as far as the craft with the green flame, this is the same thing that's been seen by Air Force pilots, traveling faster than anything they've ever seen. It has a cylindrical shape to it. I don't know, man. I don't know where they come from. I don't know what their intentions are. I think as soon as they can identify you as a person who may be a little bit more politically minded, or politically thinking in a certain way, that you're identified by them. Okay? And then you can have some really strange encounters if they can foresee enough in you of a resistance, which look what's come of me. Or maybe from the moment you're born they know, or even way before that. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And I did have some really strange experiences, and as I've said before, around the whole coma witch thing, and what I think is some kind of maybe a system that goes all the way back to the story of Odysseus, where they announce you as some kind of hero. And then the very next thing that happens is you go on this journey where you're the supposed hero, and everything's really plotted out in advance, this odyssey in which you're going to encounter this woman who's like she has this ability to put you under this spell. And just by engaging with her on any level. And so that's kind of what's been spelled out in this song, Observer. It's just this woman who's going to put me under this spell and really isn't going to have shit to do with me, and it's just going to be a whole nightmare in retrospect for me. And I just think that it's just, there was no records of this. There was just a verbally passed down story. And perhaps it was just so important that society tried to pass it down from, by verbally, because there was no records to be allowed of it, because there was something over us that was getting rid of the records. And that's why it was being passed down verbally, is because they knew it was important if it was going to be destroyed as a historical record. And so, stuff like that, and then the whole storyline is basically they reenact a scene between me and my ex-girlfriend that actually did happen, and where she was talking about how we can't be, basically everything was, the first part of the whole conversation, something that actually was said between us. And I ended up going to this facility, and I've already gone through this publicly and said, I went to this facility that I found out was a Soviet brainwashing facility, and that we did end up fighting a lot. And, that conversation was one that was actually had during that period. And then there's another, and then they play it up and make it worse. And then there's going to be this woman who's going to it just basically to me feels like one woman is really a taunting mechanism, and then they're going to make you feel like you've left your first love, when really it's just something that has already been done and over with. You know what I mean? But then I got to the psych ward while I was going through all these assassination attempts, and because people didn't believe me, and then there was more people that tried to kill me, and I said, take me away, and then they tried to put me in a psych ward. And so that story is elaborate, and it's an hour long. I've made a video. It's on my other channel. I'm not going to sit here and explain it to you. But basically, once I got in there, in this fucking facility, I opened up the Bible, and it's talking about in Revelations how, therefore you've left your first love, and and anyone who survives this, they'll be granted an iron rod that will break apart the nations. And then there was an incident where I was talking on Twitter, and my whole conversation about in favor of Brexit was picked up by Donald Trump. That wasn't even a talking point. So it got blown up so big that if you say it wasn't a talking point, people aren't even going to believe me when I say I started the whole fucking conversation on it, because it was too big. But if you ask me, anything that gets that big is just going to have so much weight behind it. It probably caused those entire nation states to end up separating. And so I think it was almost like a revelation from the past, of something that the aliens have, because David talks about how the Holy Spirit is guiding him through this, and something entered my body and had me pacing around telling me, I'm the King of Kings, or whatever, the King of everything. You can say the King of Kings, however you want to say it. It wasn't the exact words that it used, but it was the exact same sentiment. Just the exact same. And it was the most unbelievable feeling I've ever felt. And, Christ himself said that he wasn't this person, but that a spirit came into him and he guided him around, and he was just an actor that was just there. Basically, he basically called himself like a flesh bag. And you read the Bible, and it says that humans are below the aliens, or below the angels, which to me sounds a lot like aliens, or that's what they are, So, but if you ask me, it's not as simple as the devil and God and good angels and bad angels. Is probably something more along the lines of what I've said before, which is I started saying this a few years ago, actually, and ended up in music and stuff. I'm not going to go into it, but basically, talking about how there was this, a bunch of civilizations clashed over just billions and trillions of years and gave rise to a new species altogether that basically just thrives on, basically acts like God, like what the Bible says the devil is. And you could call it angels in a group, or you could call it just one thing. But it all thinks like one entity. So, and its main driving thought is, like I've said, just that fear, that instinct. You call it whatever you want, to continue establishing these scenarios around the galaxy where life can flourish for a while, but you can't let it go on forever. And a lot of these things like the establishment of the rule of law and things like what you see in the Old Testament, it's a dual purpose thing. If you ask me, it's about establishing the rule of law. It's about getting people started, establishing a civilization and become civic minded, because they're already animalistic and they're going to beat each other with rocks. So you just get them to redirect those instincts into a almost constructive way, but almost a prematurely constructive way, where they're then able to be more destroyed because because we're not at a point where we can even maintain our own level of civilization, which is almost, you could consider that an anomaly in and of itself, because why would something create a civilization that it isn't ready to sustain? It's not something that nature would produce given its own will, because it's not something that nature does. Nature doesn't create scenarios where it destroys itself because it gets too advanced too fast. It creates scenarios where it advances as fast as it needs to advance in order to not destroy itself ever. And so we've been granted these passages, and you got to ask yourself why. And so I think that, like I've said, I think it achieves that. And so you could say, wow, we need to fucking go back in the Dark Ages. No, we can always use these things to our advantage. We're going to have to anyways, because we can't afford to. There's too much nuclear weapons and too much going on. So the thing about it is basically they not only do that, but they can invoke these type of cultural dysfunctions, where people are wanting to hit each other in the head over being gay and hit each other in the head with rocks over prostitution and stuff. That's probably doesn't fall into line with, it doesn't feel good, and it causes problems, and we know it's wrong, but we're guided by religion. But how can we say we're guided by religion when Jesus came to stop all that? Well, because it goes all the way back to the Old Testament. And of course, it's still ingrained in us from the Old Testament. And so you got to ask yourself, why did it ever end up in there in the first place? And you say, Tanner, how can all these fucking religious shit all come from aliens? Well, look at what the vapor smoke was. Straight up aliens. So we got to assume that all this shit comes from aliens. And so the thing about it is the burning bush, all that stuff, I've seen things similar to that in a biblical nature, to even a stronger degree than he saw it. Because when he saw it, there was no technology that he could attribute it to, so maybe it was about the same, but still what I'm trying to say is that basically what I'm saying is that they create the cultural dysfunction to then be the solution of it. But really, when Jesus Christ gets, when all this shit comes back and starts seeing vapor smoke and all this return of Jesus Christ stuff, it's really like Jesus Christ is coming back like a hitman, to point out the targets for us to kill for them. And you say, Tanner, if something has this much power, why not just kill you itself? That doesn't make any sense. No, this is, like I said, a system that's been perfected by time, like a spider weaves its web unthinking. It doesn't think about, what the end result is. It doesn't even think about what it's doing, or the fact that, this is a perfect web that's going to, catch my prey. It doesn't even think about it being wrong or predatory, and it's not part of the system. It didn't evolve that way. It didn't evolve to just come in here and crash in here and kill us. Because that's not the best way. That's not the most efficient way. That's not the most effective way to destroy something. Let's put it like this. If you can destroy 1 million civilizations by brute force, but out of 1 million civilizations, brute force doesn't work one time, and that's consistent over the course of the destruction of 1 billion civilizations. Well, if it didn't work once, then there was a new civilization, and the new civilization knew that it wasn't right to go in and do it by brute force, because it didn't work that time that we made it. So with knowledge, it continues to do what's right, but eventually it forgets and it starts doing brute force again. And the next one comes along and it's thinking, I can't win by brute force, but it has a little bit more than thought, because it's what's left over of 2 attempts where knowledge has been involved. And so it now has something more along the lines of instinct, because it's the remnant. You see? And you do that a million times with, failing to remember that brute force isn't always the option. And eventually you come to a civilization that operates based on instinct, not to ever utilize brute force every single time. And you do that for 1 trillion years. You continue with that process for another 1 trillion years. Keep doing that for about another 75 octillion years. And then you keep doing it times that, times, let's put it in figures of somewhere, 75,000 times of a multiple of that amount of time. Eventually what you have is a system that's based in ancient advanced technology that doesn't even probably exist in a physical form anymore. Possibly. Well, at least from what I've seen. And at least it goes beyond the laws of physics. And basically what you're left with is an advanced process that goes into motion thousands of years before it begins to manifest these visions and final proceedings of the process that comes in the form of all these crazy elaborate scenarios that are tied in with faith and getting people ready to accept the doom and ready to accept the finality and the final outcome, and a very multivariate approach that targets people and places them on a termination list without them even knowing it, and also while allowing them to carry out a process of conducting the mission without even knowing it, and unintentionally, elaborating on all this shit, and while causing confusion, because you don't know what the fucking agenda is. Am I supposed to think this way, or am I supposed to think that way? Or was I even supposed to realize this, or hell, I'm ahead on this. No, you're not. You're behind. Oh shit. Oh, you're supposed to think that way. You're supposed to think that way because it's true. And then shit like that, and so it's just stuff like that. And then on top of it, the people who end up surviving, those people are heavily targeted, for breaking apart nations. Their entire love life is going to be placed on some type of psychological duress or stress, or psychological anguish is going to be invoked from outside sources and inside sources. And it's just a very, very advanced approach, and a very hands-off approach. It's just so advanced because they can do all of this shit without ever having to get involved, And so, there is the whole thing about showing me, the hypocrisy and pointing it out, but, based on the fact that this is coming from aliens and all the other stuff that draws suspicion, such as only accept things with the simplicity of a child, and the only unforgivable sin is claiming to be Jesus Christ, and it just seems like some kind of thing where they make you the prophet, and then they say a prophet's never welcome in his own country, which you aren't supposed to want to really leave, because it's where you're born and raised and where things are normal for you. And but it still makes it viable as a targeting mechanism, because if you say that a prophet's never welcome on the face of the earth, then it sounds like, oh, okay. I mean, we still need the religion to be viable. We need it believable enough to still effectively achieve all the things that they need it to achieve. And so, it's not, to me, I can't say that I think it is as effective as it's supposed to be perceived, or that it's gonna achieve the things that it's going to achieve. But when I really start to think about it, I think, anything that would pursue this on any level while possessing technology greater than us already has a backup plan, and that backup plan involves just destroying us straight up. And so that's why I take the time to explain what I've seen and everything like that.